Hello, everyone. I'll give you a second to get connected. Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1327th New Social Environment. I'm Magley, a programs associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Michelle Silva and Chrissie Iles. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Michelle Silva served as director and assistant to renowned artist and filmmaker Bruce Conner. Their collaborative edit of three-channel video installation, Three Screen Ray, an expansive, explosive iteration of Connor's seminal 1961 film Cosmic Ray, has exhibited worldwide. It is held in the permanent collections of the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, Walker Art Center, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and the Louisiana Museum of Modern Art. Currently, Silva resides in Los Angeles, where she manages the exhibition, preservation, and restoration of the Bruce Connors films for his estate. And our host today, Chrissie Iles, is the Anne and Joel Ehrenkranz curator at the Whitney Museum of American Art. Her curatorial focus is contemporary art, film, and video, and art of the 1960s and 70s from a global perspective. Her exhibitions at the Whitney include co-curating three Whitney Biennials in 2004, 2006, and the 2024 Biennial, Even Better Than the Real Thing. And with that, I will hand it over to Chrissie to get us started.
Thank you, Magley. Welcome, everybody. And thank you also to Chloe and to Joshua, and of course to Fong, whose vision and understanding of the art community brings us all together here today at the Rail, our beloved Brooklyn Rail. I'm delighted to be talking with Michelle Silva today, who is a wonderful colleague and friend. We've worked together a lot, and Michelle's deep experience with Bruce Conner, and also working so closely with Bruce, very, very closely for a long time, really, I think brings a unique understanding of the complexity of Bruce's work and films and filmmaking and art making that's very rare. This kind of crossover between the sort of conceptual, artistic, and also sort of technical aspects of making a film and a film installation and art, which doesn't usually happen all in one person. So we're very lucky to be talking with Michelle on the occasion of the wonderful Marciano Foundation show in Los Angeles of Bruce's films that's just opened. I should also mention quickly that the Whitney has a very long relationship with Bruce's work. And we have quite a few works by Bruce in the collection in film, as well as sculpture, photography, prints, and drawings. We have the installation Eat, Ray Forever. We have three films, a movie, The White Rose and His Eyes on the Sparrow. We also have three sculptures, two photographs, 6 drawings, and 17 prints, as well as Jay DeFeo's monumental painting, although it's more like a sculpture, The Rose, which is a subject of one of Bruce's films that we'll be talking about, The White Rose. So I feel like also the Whitney is honored to be in conversation with you and at the Rail, Michelle, for that reason too. So before we get into it, just a couple of quick words to situate Bruce to begin. For those of you who might not know, Bruce was born in 1933 in McPherson, Kansas, and grew up in Wichita, Kansas. So really grew up right over on the West, and also studied fine art there. But then in 1955, he got a scholarship to study in New York at the Brooklyn Museum Art School. And really everything sort of took off. And he had his first gallery show in New York there the following year, showing paintings. And then he moved to San Francisco in 1957 and began to make and show sculptures, assemblages, prints and collages there. That really began to kind of develop very rapidly the grammar of his work that you really see in all these films, with critiques of consumerism, the war, and the social dissent, and then began to make films, with his first film and movie being made the following year. So just right out of the gate, Bruce is making uh, using film at a moment in the late 50s when it's a really sort of a critical turning point. I think between these sort of two, in a way, overlapping historical moments, that repressive political climate and McCarthyism of the 1950s and the Cold War, and then the 60s, and the sort of increasingly saturated sort of media landscape. So that's just a few sort of remarks to situate Bruce's work. And what, Michelle, I thought we'd do is go through the films maybe chronologically and talk about them. We'll ask Michelle questions, because the interesting thing about Bruce's films, as Michelle will tell us, is there's nothing linear about them. And so, you know, in a sense, the best thing might be to start chronologically in order to see how Bruce goes back and forth and around and returns to imagery and is always responding to the particular moment that he's making them in, and yet is really anticipating the current media and social media climate in the way he works. So that's a long preamble, but we'll start maybe the PowerPoint. But before we do, Michelle, is there anything you'd like to add at this point?
Not at the moment. I think I'd rather show people, before saying too much. And then we can have everyone kind of look at the clips and we can talk about them as we go, because it is really complicated, especially the timeline as you're saying. So yeah, let's jump in. Okay, this is taken while Bruce was at the University of Nebraska, I believe 1955. This is kind of, I just wanted to give a glimpse of more or less kind of how young he was when him and Jean got married and they went off to San Francisco in 1957. And, on that end, started jumping in with making assemblages and also with making a movie the year after he landed there, with a very short splicing lesson from Lawrence Jordan. And he actually made and edited the film in Lawrence Jordan's apartment as well. So I think the next slide is the opening section of a movie, which we can play. Okay. So of course he's, trying to deconstruct the usual visual language of cinema, of movies. So here's his name for 30 seconds holding on screen, and you're being forced to to look at this. And he shot all of his own credits. So of course, we did leave his name crooked because it was his first movie. And here we have, all right. So he was inspired by the projectionists that would accidentally project the countdown leaders before the films and became aware of this secret language of the projectionists. So I think he wanted to make people more aware of the structures and how images and media and information is being fed to them, by deconstructing it. So, all right, and now we're ending. Okay, the stopwatch. So this was Bruce's stopwatch that he used to actually synchronize sound to picture. He did not have any money. He only had very, primitive means of being able to sync sound and picture. So this was his father's stopwatch, which he gave to me not long before he passed away. So I treasure this and keep it close to me, but it also is a reminder of what you can do with limited means, that you don't need a lot of money to make great art or to, for him, he changed cinema, with making a movie. And I know that a lot of people don't really know that he's kind of the originator of a lot of these concepts of remixing and making a movie completely of appropriated material, with the exception of the titles that he shot of his name. So I think that, you know, I want this generation and I hope that this generation can learn about the origins of, you know, now this remix culture and go back to 1958 and understand where it started.
A couple of things that occur to me as we're talking, Michelle. One is that, am I right in thinking the original conception for a movie was as a rear projected loop film to be used in one of Bruce's boxed constructions?
Yes, yes.
So
But he couldn't afford to do that.
right.
And that's why and you know, I think that that's where he had ideas about installation early on, but you know, at the time, this is the movie he could afford to make. At that time, he couldn't afford to shoot a lot of film. So this was a lot of, you know, castle home movies, traditional projection, but we have done rear projections of a movie using 16 millimeter loops and have tried to recreate that, um, you know, in the same spirit.
Because another thing that I remember reading is that Bruce commented, because some of the editing includes the separation of one shot from another with black film. And so you see an image and then you see black and then you see an image again. And he said that for him, each shot was a separate movie, which I thought was really interesting. I would also use it as a spacing mechanism and a way of emphasizing that the film is a film, meaning when we look at a film in the traditional, 16 millimeter celluloid sense, we're looking at a black screen anyway, 24 frames a second, but the speed of the film creates the illusion of continuity. So he's making us very aware of the materiality of that gap between one image and another, and also saying, well, that gap, that black film, is a film in itself, which I think is really radical, especially for, the time.
I mean, absolutely. And I think that he wanted to present these fragments, and I think that we are trying to make sense of it. We're trying to create our own narrative as we're watching it, even though there isn't one. And that's part of what he wanted was for the audience to project their own experiences or interpretations of the work onto it. So that was the kind of the final stage of the work for him. And he would yeah, he was very free with letting people create their own interpretations and not say anything, actually. So but with this one, I know this was the movie that was in his head for a very long time, and he expected other people to make that movie. He thought somebody is so obvious, somebody's going to do it, and no one ever did. So then he was forced to become a filmmaker and and make that movie in his head. So
I think another thing that maybe we should remember is that at that moment and until the 80s, when everything shifted again with sort of people being able to rent videos, a lot of people saw movies on TV. So that relationship between TV and you know and cinema and Hollywood, and you might see a Hollywood film on TV or you might see it in the cinema, because if you didn't catch it on the cinema, you might catch it on TV. And so the beginning of that media landscape in which things start to become very that sort of multi-sited is also the background to this a little bit. This way in which we absorb all these different images from ads to cinema and back again. The collaging between ads and cinema is also what you'd actually see on TV if you were watching a movie.
yes,
Right for the ad.
exactly. And I think that that's where, you know, he brought those two things together, the footage that he shot of the dancer Beth Puther, along with a lot of that imagery that you would see on television, whether it be newsreel commercials, you know, and also kind of the, you know, military actions and bombs and also this kind of um, freedom, you know, this where she's empowered and she has agency over her own body, and that was radical for that time. And I think that, how work ages over time has also been interesting, where, in the 60s it was, you know, very shocking, but then the 70s come along and women are protesting Bruce's films, because now feminism is taking on a different role and looking at this film differently. And it was always about female empowerment, like for Bruce, that I know. And Beth was a very dear friend of his, and also Jean. So yeah, I think that cultural attitudes of the moment really affect how we look at things. Um, so I'm kind of glad that we've come full circle to also be able to appreciate what this, also what cosmic ray was and how important it was for the time. And also,
Cosmic.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
Um, yeah, and also being one of the first films to pervade the music video, where we have a film that is, cut in sync to a pop song, not visual music, but a popular music, the pop music. So, right, we did, and he did this also with the stopwatch. So imagine that every few seconds having to click and write down those frames and the duration of each, of the lyrics, and he did that.
Yeah.
Right.
Looking to Breakaway, maybe we can also see how that a shift occurred where this is completely shot from scratch, and it is 1966, a 5-minute film with the dancer Tony Basil, and this film is Tony is performing her own recording of the song Breakaway. And this idea of editing as choreography, because there's freeze frames, reverse footage, jump cuts, isolated gestures. So Tony's movements are being filmed and then edited in a way that suggests that, cinema is sort of constructing the choreography as opposed to recording it.
Mm-hmm. So he did 2 shoots for the film Breakaway, and the first one was in 1964, and this was just with a black tarp, and Dean Stockwell was also there, and this was shot in Jim Elliott's apartment above the carousel in the Santa Monica Pier in Los Angeles. And I think that with the choreography for the camera, and it was action cinematography. So he's zooming in and out and also moving around her as she's dancing to get those very unique to film, these motion blurs and these smears, and using every single frame rate of the camera that it offers, whether it's the single frame, 12 frames, 30, he's using every single frame rate. And, just when you think the film is over, here she goes running in reverse. And, that was also unique at the time. So what he did was run the soundtrack in reverse, but also flipping the film. So physically flipping the 16 millimeter film in the orientation, so the emulsion's the right side, So that's how he was able to kind of cheaply make her run in reverse for the second 2.5 minutes. Yeah.
Shall we take a look at the clip and see what he does there?
Right.
It's really interesting to look at that and think about the fact that Tony is she's very much in control of the way her relationship to the camera is happening at a moment when women are beginning to take the camera, especially the video camera, but also the Super 8 film camera, and turn it on themselves and actually take control of their own image. And this comes out of or in relation to Maya Deren's early dance for camera movies on the one hand, but is also really anticipating TikTok and social media in a lot of ways in which Toni herself is singing. And so there's something very interesting about that.
Well, and also it may appear that the film was shot for this music, and it was not. The music was not recorded until 66. So even though it seems like these things are perfect, marriage of sound and picture, it's hard to believe that they weren't. And I think that that's important that, Bruce was always working with his own kind of visual rhythm outside of the sound, that he actually did the same thing with The White Rose, with Crossroads, is that he would edit picture silent a lot of the times and maybe make a few tweaks so there's some direct hits, but really, no, they did not shoot that with the intention of using it. It could have been anything. Um, and so now we're showing Breakaway uh, on a screen that's about 20 feet tall. So if you can imagine a giant Toni Basil, and it's wonderful. And she came to the opening, and we're delighted that she's celebrating the work with us, and yeah, that we can all be proud of it. But I think the running in reverse part. So the first version of Breakaway was actually not the forward reverse. So Bruce made one version of it was called Double Breakaway, and it was forward forward, and it's a different edit completely. So he made one print of that and gave it away, which I wish he hadn't, but I do have a reference of it. And so then I see a letter that he wrote to Stan Brakhage that in 1967 is when he actually started to run the film in reverse on his own projector. So he wrote, "What kind of projector do you have?" After the film ends, I'm running it in reverse. So through these letters that he would write to Stan Brakhage, I've learned so much about when he decided to make changes, when sound was added, because they would send each other prints in the mail, along with letters about, like with The White Rose, he wrote, "I know you prefer it silent, but I've been listening to the first 7 minutes of Sketches of Spain with it lately." And so that's when I'm like, okay, he didn't decide to add Sketches of Spain until 68. So these are the things that have been really wonderful to learn. So
I think what you're describing is also something very important to bear in mind in today's very sort of tightly controlled, monetized art world in which everything has got to be finished, and then there's an edition, and everything is very, but it didn't used to be like that, and it was much more fluid, and there were different versions of something, or different ways in which people collaborated formally and informally, and there was a kind of looseness to those collaborations that were born out of friendship and also sharing technical knowledge, just as the filmmaker Larry Jordan was teaching Bruce at the beginning, or Robert Fiore filmed Smiths and Spiral Jetty, or a lot of artists work because they didn't know how to handle 16mm film, and so everyone was helping each other or creating each other's soundtracks or doing various things, and that's something that we see also here with Jay DeFeo's The Rose, and here's an image of Jay DeFeo making the rose, which itself has a very extended long date, because it is, I'm looking for the dates actually, because it is so extended. And it started in the late 50s, I think in 58, and then went through to 67. And Jay DeFeo and Bruce were friends. And if we go on to the next slide, here it is actually at the Whitney, because it's a very long story of how it came to the Whitney and how we brought it in the late 90s. But if we go on to the next slide, we will see a clip with without Miles Davis's sketches of Spain, because you'll see in some of these clips the sound has been removed because this talk counts as broadcast and there aren't the rights to show it. So if you can imagine sketches of Spain in your head, and let's look at how Bruce in the studio and working with Jay DeFeo engaged with what she was making, and how he made the film.
Okay. Well, with what I love about seeing the rose painting, and it's, you know, where it was made, is that it only, you know, that room only had those two light sources on the sides of the painting, and that there was no electricity in that room. And so it's when it was, you know, I went to the Whitney and I sat in front of it for a long time. And I do feel like, you know, when you put so much of yourself into a work, the way that Jay did, the way that Bruce has, where he puts years into the films, you do impart, you know, part of your soul with it. I do believe that. And no, the painting is definitely it's alive. I felt that. But their friendship too was really, I mean, when they would make something, they would have a party, and that's kind of how that was the only way for people to see the work, is that they would actually, he called them home movies because they were shown at home. That was the audience, is that you finish the movie and then you show it to your friends, and there might be a showing at a you know, at a gallery, but not really a commercial gallery, more of a kind of co-op situation. But yeah, that's the spirit of this work, is that it just had to be made. There was no commercial purpose. It wasn't a product. It wasn't you know, something that was going to go on display and then you change it out to put the new thing to attract more people. It was nothing like that. And I think that's why I was so, and still am, just so drawn to this era and this work. And why I love it so much is because it defies all of that. It's born out of just true creative expression. There's yeah,
Yeah.
just you had to make it, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Report, a film made from 63 to 67, which is the previous film, White Rose, was 7 minutes. Report is 13 minutes. Black and white and sound. Maybe we can see this brief clip, and then had a couple of things to ask you about by way of beginning it, you know, chatting about this film.
The President's car is now turning onto Elm Street, and it will be only a matter of minutes before he arrives at the trademark. I was on Stemmons Freeway earlier, and even the freeway was jam-packed with spectators waiting their chance to see the President as he made his way toward the trademark. It it appears as though something has happened in the motorcade route. Something, I repeat, has happened in the motorcade route. There's numerous people running up the hill alongside Elm Street, there by the Stemmons Freeway. Several police officers are rushing up the hill at this time. Stand by just a moment, please.
So, report deals, as obviously you can see, with the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. He said he made 8 versions, and it was the last one that became the definitive version. He would make a print and then change it, make another print, always with the same length and the same soundtrack. And it was something that really struck me was he said that the information everyone got on TV when Kennedy was shot and later Bobby Kennedy was confused, just as the imagery here is. The media were trying to control what was coming across, but the reporter was trying to remain composed in front of the camera. But it was impossible because no one knew what on earth was going on. And so the TV station would start repeating the same footage. And the other thing that struck me about this film is how personal it is to Bruce, because he talked about the fact that he was living 7 blocks from where Kennedy was born in Brookline, Massachusetts, when it happened. And he used TV stock footage to show how the media was not only recording or telling us about Kennedy's death, but exploiting it. And so how could he do this film without restating that exploitation? And he also said he made those different versions because if the film was completed, then it meant he was really dead, as he felt the media had made him so. And so it took him 2.5 years to finish it. And he said life has changed. And when Report was finished, then he was dead for him. So it took me, he said, 2.5 years to acknowledge that he was dead, that Kennedy was dead. And so this interesting way also in which you suddenly see this countdown leader and everything when people realize that Kennedy is maybe dead. It's almost like the heartbeat of the projector has gone wrong. And the cross that's the center of the film leader suddenly becomes the target. And so those are not my thoughts. There's something that I found that I was researching that I think is really interesting when we think about the making of this film and what it is.
Yes, I think that when he first screened the film, he actually got a pretty strong response from people, and mostly that he was being disrespectful to Kennedy. And I think that having to deal with this response from people helped him to start really thinking about his intentions and why he was doing it. And even people who said, I didn't vote for him, but what I think you've done is terrible, So I mean, and that he started to understand that what he was doing was processing the grief that he felt and trying to understand this situation. So he told me that once you heard about Kennedy's assassination, that news just got more and more confusing, that you got further and further away from the truth as time went on. And I think, what he was dealing with back then, we're dealing with today, we have no consensus on what's true anymore. And so he was dealing with fake news back then. We're dealing with the same thing, just amplified, just, out of control. And I know that he just felt, and this was something he suspected about the sound. So, and actually I want to credit Erica Levin for her research on this. So the sound, so you have the beginning of the sound, which is authentic. You hear the chaos, the sirens, and that. After those sirens end, you get into this other part of the recording that sounds really staged. And even Bruce felt it was off, because nobody says he's dead all right. I mean, it was really that. So what happened was that the KBOX Dallas news reporters had to reenact the report
Hmm.
because those tapes went missing.
Hmm.
They were seized. And so the original tapes were not there, and they had to reenact it like a radio show so they could keep repeating the news. Um, this is something that we learned after Bruce passed away, but I almost wish I could tell him, you were right.
Hmm.
You were right. So there's no, I think the only evidence is that there's not a sufficient amount of background noise and chaos on the second part of the recording after the sirens. But anyway, I just wanted to say that because I feel like that's not well known.
Yeah.
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 And with the versioning, we do have the second to last version in cold storage. He gave away a lot of prints, so he would change the edit each time, because, for a movie and the other films, people would ask him, did you change something because it's different? And he hadn't, it's just that you're different, when you're watching it versus the last time you watched it. And so he decided, well, what if I did change the film each time? And he did. So version 3, he did a digital recreation of that, and it's there's 8 minutes of the rifle that Oswald used going by, repeating over and over again. The second to last version, there's these long sections of black where he doesn't want you to look at the image. He wants you to focus on the audio. So those moments where those pauses are also that he's redirecting you.
Hmm.
And so for the second to last version, this long section of black is actually white, but exact same frame count each time. And every now and then I get an email from someone who says, I have a unique print of report. I always investigate it because maybe it is.
Right.
Haven't found it, but one person said they have a print of Bruce's of report that's unique because it has his blood on the print. That he actually decided to bleed on the print, and I don't know how well that's holding up, but I'm going to eventually investigate that one. But back to here with television assassination, which is kind of I feel related to report as he's shooting off of the television set on 16 millimeter around that time, which was around Thanksgiving. So I think the commercialism around his death was something that was really disturbing and grotesque for Bruce. And that, everything in death is kind of grotesque, but that's also where he went to the bank and he saw that there was Kennedy heads for sale as piggy banks,
Hmm.
and he just got shot in the head. So, I mean, this is, yeah. So these were the things that he wanted to draw attention to, is that you would see the repetition of the motorcade was really him watching the same news clip over and over again, over and over again. And then Thanksgiving turkeys, and then this, and so I think that, Bruce wanted everyone else to kind of see the world the way that he did. He wanted to point it out to people and kind of wake them up. And I think that was initially his goal, was to reveal the messages or just to question it. Just
Yeah.
just question it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because as always, when we talk, time goes by so fast. I just want to
Yes.
move on to the next group of images we have, which is a picture of Bruce with their thank you, Maggie, with a group of his paintings made in Mexico, because Bruce lived in Mexico from 1961 to 62 with his wife Jean. And then if we skip to, not skip, but go on to this image of actually another work in our collection, El Macho, El Señor, in 1962, made in Mexico. And then next slide on to Looking for Mushrooms, which is a film that was made, and the dates are 1959 to 67/1996. And we can talk a little bit about dating. It's because we want to also talk about, Crossroads and Eat Break Forever and Free Screen Ray, but so maybe we'll kind of bundle these questions of why there are so many different datings and how Bruce worked a little bit later. But this is a really interesting slide you made, Michelle, of the silent loop version, 1959 to 65, the Beatles version, a Terry Riley version, so the soundtracks, which maybe we can talk about when we come to Crossroads. But let's have a look at this clip from Looking for Mushrooms, which is Bruce's first color film, and made exclusively from footage he shot when he lived in Mexico. So, not to spend too long on Looking for Mushrooms, just because we do have these three other works to discuss, but just let's hold Looking for Mushrooms so that we can maybe talk and also answer questions towards the end, and move on to Crossroads, which is a really powerful work made in 1976. Here is Bruce around that time. Next slide. Here is Bruce with two composers, Patrick Gleason and Terry Riley, whose compositions form the soundtrack in two halves. And let's see how that works. Here is the Patrick Gleason section of the film. And then the next, in the second part of the film, we move to a part with Terry Riley, and then I'll just say a couple of words about how the film is made and hand it over to you, Michelle. So,
well, that's strange. So yeah, that clip was actually supposed to progress past that image. But at
Into
least
an explosion.
sounds. Yeah, I don't know what
Yeah.
happened.
I mean, oh, I was just going to say, so really, I mean, this film is a sort of critique of the spectacle of violence. It's composed of films shot by the US government, of test explosions of the atomic bomb in the Bikini Atoll in the Pacific Ocean in 1946. The Defense Department had sort of recently declassified the films, and Bruce was amazingly able to get them, which Michelle can tell us more about. And through absolutely minimal editing, the Defense Department shot these experiments with over 500 cameras at the scene. And those cameras were in airplanes, were on the land nearby, on ships. I mean, it's just the most documented, extraordinarily mediated event. And so this Derrida argued in 1984 that since nuclear war has no precedent, it can't be represented. And so in a sense, I think what Bruce is doing here is sort of staging the implications of technology as in terms of catastrophe, and it's resonating right now at this very moment, more than ever. So maybe Michelle, you can say a little bit about how he made the film, and we can talk about its resonance then and now. Speaking of the piggy bank of Kennedy's head, I mean, atomic sort of mushroom clouds were on tablecloths, kids' curtains everywhere, bikini, and you had this similar.
Oh yeah, they wanted you to love the bomb, and that's why, showing it all the time to get people used to it was part of that. And I think he grew up seeing that image since he was a child, and I think around the 70s he started noticing that that image was starting to go away and wanted to remind people that this is still, he wanted to remind people of the apocalypse and about their own death and to consider their mortality still, and also to give this particular event its official portrait, as he put it. So when this footage became declassified, he started writing a lot of letters. He was very persistent. Eventually gained access, went to Washington, D.C. to look at all of these 77 rolls that were declassified and chose which ones to get kind of duplicate prints, like dupe negatives of. It was supposed to be 16 millimeter, but then he did get more grant money, so then it became 35 millimeter. So he was able to work at that gauge for the first time. And at that point, he, for his letters, how he was going to approach this sound, he said appropriate sound in his letters, which just doesn't say anything. But he approached his, friends and composers, Patrick Leeson and Terry Riley, to collaborate on a soundtrack for this film. Unfortunately, they were not able to collaborate. And I think Patrick is very careful in saying that he, is a dear friend of Terry's and that he respects him tremendously, but for some reason he just couldn't get in there and that Terry was hogging all the tracks. So, so Bruce had to cut the film into two parts to settle a dispute between the composers. And so each one got their part. Patrick's is 13 minutes, Terry's is 24. That it is separated with a card that is actually a cross. It's a crosshairs, and I think neither one of them knew what the other was going to do. So Terry had no idea what Patrick was doing, etc. And I think that it could not have come out more perfect than it is. And I think that they both prove how powerful sound is and how it can actually dominate picture in certain respects. Good, it's playing. Okay, well, at least people got to see the picture. All right, so here is part of uh, what we've been doing for the Marciano show. So we created a special mix. We found this master that had been lost, or not lost technically, but miscategorized in cold storage. So this is the 16-track 2-inch master that Terry and Patrick recorded on. So we were able to do a new mix that is actually 8 channels plus the LFE subwoofer for the Marciano installation. And when I approached Patrick, because I wanted him to be part of this and in the studio with us, he said, "Who am I to stop art from evolving?" And I really thought I loved that. He was open and he was really excited about this. So, we really wanted his active participation, and unfortunately, he recently had a stroke. He's at home recuperating, but I hope that we made him proud. But we did consult with both sides, and I think everyone's happy. So. But this is, yes, an expanded way of hearing the layers that Terry was working in. It felt like you were in the studio with them back in 75. It was very powerful to understand how these layers are kind of woven. They come in and out, and we had to look at their handwritten notes to figure out how to do that. But that was on sound engineer John Polito, who did a fantastic job. He's the best. So anyone who's looking for a sound engineer, come to LA. And
that slide we can also see
yeah, you can see John.
You can see him working.
Yeah. Okay, so this slide is showing you how we're working spatially and how we've turned each of the tracks into objects that kind of move around the room. Which is at the time that this was recorded back in 75, there was only mono optical available. So thinking about how it was recorded versus how it was distributed or screened, I mean, their stereo wasn't a standard then, not yet. So that's important to think about how the work evolves too. The tools are getting better, so we have that.
Which is already the landscape of music, world of music in general. So it's very interesting to think about this in relation to this film. And actually, because we have 5 minutes left, maybe slightly less, maybe we can go on to the next slide. Oh, here is John Polito.
There's John, yeah.
And then,
just a glimpse on how we work. Yes, we were in a calibrated room, and but yes, moving on. Ivre Forever.
Well, there are 2 last works to maybe talk about together before we open it up to questions, and one is Ivre Forever, 1965 / 2006, and the other is 3 Screen Ray, 2006. And so maybe we can talk about the 2 of them together. Ivre Forever was made in 1965, 3 Super 8 film loops projected in a gallery for Bruce's show at the Rose Art Museum at Brandeis in 1965. The center screen shows the footage of footage from Cosmic Ray. The two screens left and right show portions of Cosmic Ray with additional footage of Beth Prather and other footage. And the three films are different lengths, so they're out of sync, which creates another layer of collaging. And then if we go to the next slide, with three screen Ray, we can see this other three screen installation film that was made in 2006. And you worked very closely with Bruce on these two works,
Yes.
didn't you, Michelle? And so maybe you can talk to us about this. And this is the moment where we start to sort of maybe unpack some of those questions about dating and about collaging and recollaging and what that means.
Well, so initially, he approached me to help with this project with restoring the 8mm cartridges for the Rose Art Museum. And I think that what happened is that, at that time, Bruce had only used video for means of transferring film, and it was not a creative tool for him. That was important. I think that if it hadn't been me coming into the picture with Bruce, having Final Cut Pro get to a stage where it was actually starting to move in the professional market, but also being affordable, that we were able to work cheaply for hours and hours and hours on this thing that before would have cost him, 300 an hour back then in a room at a post house. So I think that this is where technology does come into play, that I knew that there were some decisions when we started working together, we work at my house. And the first session, I knew he was making a decision where he didn't understand all of his options. And as an editor, I just knew, okay, you don't know the full capacity of what you're working with, the tool. And so I sheepishly asked him if I could cut something for him. And I think that was a scary moment for me, working with Bruce, was to tell him, I'm going to show you something, and then you can decide what you want. I just wanted to show him what tools were, sorry, that should not be happening. So yeah, he looked at me and I thought he was probably going to fire me that day. But then he said, you have 3 minutes. So I cut 3 minutes where I was able to flip and mirror the images, right and left, and do kind of a chorus line with Cosmic Ray. And actually, he watched it and he took off his hat, put it down, and got comfortable. And he's like, okay. Like, he's like, can I make this positive into a negative? And I said, done. We just did that. And so I think that just getting this control back was something, and doing something at a film lab, it was really complicated, expensive if we were going to take this little clip and make it negative from positive. So I think that was something that became really fun for him. And we had, it was intense, but we had a lot of fun, and there was a lot of great memories working with him on this. So I hope that, the love and the time where we spent looking at every single frame and the juxtaposition and relationships of those images frame by frame, that it shows. I think it does. But we can play the clip and have people get a little glimpse of Three Screen Ray. This is without the Ray Charles soundtrack, unfortunately, but just it's What I'd Say, live from Atlanta, 1959.
It's interesting listening to you, Michelle, and thinking about the key role an editor plays in Hollywood film or independent film. Scorsese would be nowhere without Thelma. Thelma is what makes Scorsese's films what they are. And she is an incredible editor. And you are an editor. And, that slippage again between TV, film, art, the difference between the art world and the film world. The fact that the editor is such a key, just as the DP is a key person in the making of an independent or Hollywood or commercial film. This sort of collaboration is taken as read, and one of the things I love is that your work with Bruce on these last two works, and this work in particular, but the other one, both of them really complicates those ideas of where one thing ends and the other begins, like the film world, the art world, how a film is made, this idea of the hero, usually a white male being this sort of sole author, going all the way back to Bertolt Brecht and all his the women he collaborated with. And I think that this question also of historicizing a work and where a work begins and ends, and how, as Patrick Gleason said, who am I to interfere with, of art moving forward and what that means. There's something very freeing about that, and there's also a great deal of responsibility that comes with that you understand and demonstrate constantly. And I think that is that's very much a way of also ensuring that this work lives on into the future.
Well, I believe that, and just from experience, when I took on Bruce's film collection after he passed, I think, I was 28, and I don't think no matter what age you are, you're not quite ready for what's coming. And I think that he trusted me to use my instincts, because I'm confronted with things that he never had to deal with. So there's no, there's no roadmap necessarily where everything is clear cut. And I think the years that I spent with him do guide me to understand what was important to him, how his mind worked, because I had to be one step ahead of him. It's like being in the room with a surgeon who's like, scalpel, I was there having to be that. And, I think that why we worked so well together is because we did see the world the same way.
Yeah.
And we saw that in each other. And I think that that's where we didn't have any issues communicating things technically or aesthetically. That was not an issue. I think sometimes I said things that probably nobody said to him. But I think that we always forgave each other, and in the end, and love each other. And it was a complicated collaboration, and but really just kindred spirits in a lot of ways. But he did push me to places that I don't think I would have pushed myself on my own. So we walked down the path of madness together, and I'm here to at least kind of tell those stories a little bit.
Yeah. I have lots of questions, but I know our audience does too. Everyone gathered here, so maybe we can take some questions now.
Thank you both so much. This was such a wonderful conversation to listen to. To our audience members, if you have a question for Michelle, there's a link in the chat where you can submit your question, and we'll turn to you next. We have a couple of questions here. The first question is from David. And David is wondering what interested you in Connor's work, Michelle, and if Connor had any relationships with other experimental filmmakers and video artists such as Harry Smith, Stan Brockage, and Nam June Paik.
Okay, so I was introduced to Bruce's work when I was a student at the San Francisco Art Institute, which is very, focused on experimental avant-garde film. And I was fortunate enough to get to see, I mean, I think you can't graduate SFAI unless you've watched a movie 3 times. I think you watch it in your film history class, your art history class, and but honestly, it was really Crossroads that got me, where you watch something and you feel um, changed in some way, and it stayed with me for a long time. And that was just watching it on 16 millimeter in a classroom, and that was the one that really resonated with me. And I was 19 at the time, so I didn't think I would ever meet Bruce or get to work with him. That was something that happened when I started working at Canyon Cinema. So I was a print inspector there, and uh, one day I had to call him at home to tell him one of his prints had been damaged. And he asked where the damage was. I gave him exact frame and footage and frame counts and all the locations, and he seemed very pleased with the accuracy. But then he said, I'm coming down. I'll be there in 20 minutes. So that was how I got to meet him. It was after 3 weeks of on the job, and I was very nervous. But it was, instant connection there. And so he started asking me to do kind of odd jobs for him, like being his projectionist for certain things. And then, I got invited to dinner by Bruce and Jean, and that was a big deal because I don't think Bruce goes out to dinner with just anybody. It's kind of, so I was wondering what it was about, and at the end of dinner, he offered me a job. Um, and I was actually had people telling me not to work for Bruce, that it could end very badly for me. And I said, that's okay. If I get fired in a week, that's fine. I just have to try. And they said it could end badly for you. And I was like, well, it could begin badly too. So we'll see. But I honestly, it's one of the, I learned so much from him. And I think to start working for him at such a young age was kind of wonderful to also, but I didn't know what he was doing. He was kind of grooming me for something that I actually didn't even know or have an idea about what that was. So yeah, I think, I love these films, all of them, the found footage films and his own cinematography. I've watched these films over and over again for 20 years, and I still love them. I still see something new every time. I'm still learning new things. It's great. But okay, the second part of the question, what was that? Sorry, I lose my thread.
No, no worries. David is wondering if Bruce had any relationships with other experimental filmmakers.
He did. Bruce Bailey, Stan Brakhage. So I think also Lawrence Jordan, of course. But he was, you know, also very involved with Canyon Cinema. So I think, Bruce is one of those complicated personalities that you either love him or you don't. And so I think that he was always a very controversial character. But yeah, he did. But I know that I have a really lovely photo of him and Bruce Bailey together, and I know that they were very close, and also Stan. Yeah.
Thank you for that answer, Michelle, and that question, David. The next question is from an audience member who is wondering if Bruce considered any of his video works as a continuation of any of the work he was doing in sculpture, painting, and collage.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that all of them are kind of a sequence, so whether it's an assemblage, with photos and objects and, it's all kind of, you know, a stream of consciousness in his words and like a river kind of. And I think that that's how he felt. And also the relationships that, something would kind of go into chaos and then there was structure. And so there's I feel a lot of connection, especially collages with the found footage material. You know, he didn't make color collages, and he didn't make color found footage films. I think he told me that it was too hard to match the color for him. I think he would go insane trying to actually match the color between different sources and try to make it convincing. So he didn't even go there. So, but yes, I believe there's a thread with all of his work, personally.
Thank you for that answer. The last question is going to come from Fong, and I'll give Fong a chance to unmute.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you, Chrissy. What a wonderful conversation. I'm so happy to have this conversation because it reminds me so much when we interviewed Bruce, must have been in 2004, maybe November issue. He thank God liked my portrait of him too. So that was I was so worried about that. But you know, we also did the last interview with Stan before he died. So that maybe sometime maybe in March issue 2008, I think, with Pip Chancharov.
Okay.
And I remember I'm so happy to have spoken to them also several times. But once I had dinner with Kenneth Anger, and then he was telling me about how Brackett early on was the cameraman for Joseph Cornell, and he admired Joseph Cornell, who only made no more than 3 films, I think. So I wonder if Cornell ever been mentioned at all, because when I talked to a few friends, including John Yahoo, who interviewed Bruce then, I don't know whether he brought that up. So I wonder if you ever remember him talking about Cornell.
I mean, he never talked about Cornell with me, which is funny. I mean, and just, you know, Bruce, he was, you know, would talk about some of his influences, but he never specifically, and where the influence is obviously there. But he
Well, I
would.
don't mean the influence, you know. I mean, he have his strong vision, so we know
Yeah,
that, Michelle.
we all do. I mean,
But
we're all. I mean, we're all part of a lineage, right?
yeah.
And I think that he's aware of that too. That we're all building, you know, upon other artists' work and other movements, and that's okay. I just know that, yeah, he never spoke about Cornell with me.
Okay.
But it's clear, and especially Lawrence Jordan's relationship with Joseph Cornell as well, is that it's like obviously there was an influence, you know, there between, you know, some of the other filmmakers as well. So, but yeah, he would, yeah, he never admitted to said anything about it.
Well, I did try to ask him about also the aspect the occult, you know, which is so much a deep interest in Kenneth Anger.
Yeah, Bruce
and
was not an occultist at all.
Okay, good. All
Yeah.
right. I just want to make sure that because in the collage it's implied, right, Chrissy? In the collage.
No, I think, I mean, to me, when we think of collage,
yeah,
montage, be it in, you know, wall works or in film or photography, it runs throughout the 20th century and into the 21st. And, you know, I'm thinking of Dziga Vertov, I'm thinking of Eisenstein and Eisenstein's, you know, editing techniques. He had, you know, he used these 5 methods of metric, rhythmic, tonal, overtonal, intellectual, the rapid cutting. You know, we're really talking about, I think, the entire scope of the 20th century in terms of, and into the 21st when it comes to film and collage and found footage. And I think that everybody approaches it in a very different way. And so to my mind, what's unique about Bruce's particular, I mean, you know, the Cornell Rose Hobart, for example, that was a kind of homage to silent film because many thought when sound came that film was over, cinema was over. So he took a print. I think what's interesting is that, you know, that that Bruce can film off the TV, and what he's filming could be TV footage or it could be film footage, or he could buy a film print of a Hollywood movie, which you could then. I mean, it was very throwaway then, and it was something you could do.
Like Cool Hand Luke.
What Cornell did, he bought an 16 millimeter print of, a 1930 Hollywood film. So the way in which materiality plays into this, and the way in which the media landscape, and I think of Bruce's works in the 60s, I also think of, Stan Van Der Beek's movie mural, or, the different sort of cutting the relationship to the cybernetic environment. I also think of Bruce in relation to the Beat generation that he emerged out of, and literature, and the particular role San Francisco played at that moment in the counterculture, and that was very political, very strong political resistance that was emerging then in terms of civil rights, and the Black uprisings, feminism. There's so much that was exploding in the 1960s, and everyone was in their different, as it were, corners, working through those things. And now, when we have 2020, or if we have what's going on now, it's much more interconnected in a way that it wasn't then. And the thing that was the connective tissue then was television. And Bruce says somewhere, I didn't really go to the movies much. I watched television all the time. And I think that whether you're talking about Report, or you're thinking of Trump, it's the same. There's a media landscape that saturates the American imagination more than any other country in the world. And I think of collage in relation to that too.
Yeah. What about the relationship with the poet community, particularly people like Robert Duncan and Jazz Michelle?
I mean, he collaborated with Michael McClure. Yes. And so I think that, he was, I mean, with that, I think that, I don't know if you've ever seen this footage of him with Michael McClure, with these cards with words that he's throwing down.
Oh yeah. Yes.
And I think that he liked having this kind of something that's gonna, I guess, determine the outcome. We're just saying, okay, we're gonna have something that doesn't have structure, that we're gonna have something that's, but Bruce himself was not poetic in his writing, so I think that he did appreciate it in others. I mean, I think also reading, so that's what I gather just from reading his letters. When I see his correspondence with people like McClure and like with Stan, is that his writing is very straight reporting. And then, but I think that there was this tumultuous kind of emotion that was underneath that. I think, how it got expressed, I think, Bruce was always trying to create something that was perfect, which caused him a lot of agony. And and I think that in a way, the looseness or something of poetry was also very attractive to him, just to also have something that's not as controlled. But I think his own nature is to control and to make everything bend to his will. That whether it's mediums, whether it's people, he wanted to control it. But it also, meanwhile, always striving for perfection. And he would take him years, or weeks for, if it's an artwork or whether it's a film, to deliver on something that is perfect. And he worked tirelessly to do that. So I think that having other things, because his own work, and this is where we were having fun with Three Screen Ray. But I think, there's also this part that you're toiling over something, and, you want and you deliver on something perfect. And I think he expected other people to do the same, where to give the same amount of attention to detail, to do those things. And when they didn't, it was very disappointing for him. But yeah, I say, that the work was the air for him. It was breathing. It was everything. You know, there was not a lot of chit chat unless he wanted to.
Right.
And it was every waking moment there, it had to be productive, because his health was also failing for a very long time. But I think that he wanted to use every moment to keep going. So yeah, I know that that kind of was a diversion from your initial question, but I
No,
hope.
I just threw it out there just partly because the sense of scale has always been predicated on extreme intimacy, you know, and that's where you feel the consistency throughout, whether film or collage or drawing he made. And
Well,
I just wanna,
yeah, he wanted to draw people in, and I think
absolutely,
always making work for the individual,
yeah,
not for the masses. I mean, and this is the difference between him and Warhol, where they would draw from a lot of the same imagery from the media and use it in very different ways, where for Bruce it was deeply personal, like, you know, Jackie and the motorcade, and for Warhol not so much. So this is kind of where, you know, yeah, the found footage films are deeply personal, and then the films that he shot of his friends and you know, his travel diary through Mexico looking for mushrooms, and you know, those are to me also autobiographical. And yeah, I hope that people can look at these films, even though they're of, you know, archival footage or mass media, and understand that they are a direct reflection of him.
yeah.
And
That's brilliant.
I'm just going to say, and also as an art historian as well as curator, I'm so it's so interesting to see how Bruce's work moves through time, and to think about, say, Rafael Montañez Ortiz, who also started to make some films in 1956 to 58. In one, he took a Hollywood film, because he's an Indigenous Yaqui artist. He took a Hollywood film, a Western, and he chopped it up and smashed it with a tomahawk, and then reassembled it and recollaged it. It's the film Winchester, 1950, and you know, then moving from that through to, say, someone like Ulysses Jenkins, who's in a different media landscape, that is where television plays a different role, and then almost sort of, as it were, picks up where Bruce left off and starts. And so when you look at all the different figures across art history, it really allows you to understand how powerful Bruce's work is now, as we're, you know, yet again going to war, and the nuclear threat is closer than it's ever been since those since, well, maybe the 80s, but you know, those tests are kind of echoed now. Oppenheimer, the film, came out in war. You know, there's just, you know, and Barbie, and you know, there's this kind of intense nostalgia as America falls apart, and for this past that Bruce was even then talking about. It was happening already, almost in the present then. Which is really
so true, Chrissie. So true. Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Chrissie. Oh boy, I had to re-listen to it and go see the show one more time, maybe more. Well, thank you so much. Back to you, Mackley.
Thank you, Fawn. And thank you, Michelle and Chrissie. Thank you, Claire from Paula Cooper Gallery, for their support in preparing for today's event. We'd also like to thank the Marion Bolton Kippy Stroud Foundation and Seeger Foundation for sponsoring our NSE program and making these weekday conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rails YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 25 years. A donation directly supports our writers, staff, and operations. Support our work through the link in the chat. And if you're free, join us next Tuesday at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Naeem Ohaiman and Tausif Noor on the event of Corinthians at Wexner Center for the Arts. And as is your tradition, you can now all unmute and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you,
you.
Chrissie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you,
Thank you,
Chrissie.
Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle and Chrissie.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Congratulations on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. And go see the show, everybody.
It's
Very
amazing.
important. Bye,
Bye, everybody.
Chrissie.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
Michelle. Thank you. Thank